With regard to food shortages, yes, we did talk about food shortages.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
And it's going to be real.
God is my witness. I'll never be hungry again.
The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia. It's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well.
Well, there's another nice mess you've gotten me into.
Well, and because both Russia and Ukraine have been the breadbasket of Europe in terms of wheat, for example, just to give you one example. But we had a long discussion in the G7 with both
Today, Junior?
the United States, which has a significant, the third largest producer of wheat in the world, as well as Canada.
Not very hygienic. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Which is also a major, major producer. And we both talked about how we could increase and disseminate more rapidly food shortages.
What?
And we both talked about how we could increase and disseminate more rapidly food shortages. In addition to that, we talked about urging all the European countries and everyone else to end trade restrictions on sending limitations on sending food abroad. And so we are in the process of working out with our European friends what it would take to help alleviate the concerns relative to food shortages.
So a couple of weeks ago, when Biden told the American people to expect food shortages, the first thing I thought about wasn't the war in Ukraine or the price of gasoline, which has actually been rising since Biden was nominated president in November of 2020. It was this decades-old government program that pays farmers not to farm parts of their land. A program that is currently paying private American landowners not to use over 21 million acres of farmland in the United States alone. That's right, the U.S. government pays farmers not to use over 21 million acres of farmland. And of course, the government doesn't want you to think that that's a problem. Actually, they want you to think it's not enough. Let's start by taking a look at this Politico article titled, "A Program That Pays Farmers Not to Farm Isn't Saving the Planet." And then it goes on, it's subtitled, "A decades-old program that pays farmers to leave land fallow is being heralded by the Biden administration as a climate solution, but environmentalists don't see it that way." So this article was published in August of 2021. Biden was actually talking about this program and increasing funding for this program for most of 2021, actually since he was inaugurated, I believe. And it should be known that this program was actually put in by the Reagan administration. So let's take a look at this program, and let's take a look at what caused this program to come into being. Let's take a look at the history of farming in the United States before this program came into being and after it came into being. So the program rents or puts land out of production. It rents land to put it out of production for between 10 and 15 years. Now, this article from Politico doesn't have the details that I really like, which can be found in this counter article, thecounter.org. I believe the article is titled, "The Biden administration will pay farmers more money not to farm." And as you can see, this came out April 22nd of 2021. So the important details are right in this paragraph. So today, the department rents about 21 million acres of farmland, as I've already said, and it does so for typically between 10 and 15 years. It doesn't really say that here. Now, this right here is part of the propaganda that you will find on pretty much every article. That is that they claim that this is a tiny fraction of the total land farmed nationwide. Now, when you compare it to the total land farmed in the United States, it is sort of a tiny fraction because the total land farmed in the United States nationwide is something like over 900 million acres or something like that. So the Biden administration wants to take this program from 21 million acres to 25 million acres. Let's look at how much this is actually going to cost. So all told, the increased rental rates and expanded incentive payments, which pay farmers extra for growing buffer strips and promoting wildlife habitats, will increase CRP spending by about 18%, totaling $300 million or more in annual spending. Now, the way that they structured this paragraph kind of bothers me because a person who's reading this might not know if this is a $300 million increase to the spending or if this is the total spending being spent on this program. Now, I guess I could have looked up how much is being spent on this program, but I didn't, and that's my fault. However, this paragraph here, the very next paragraph, we can sort of infer that this is a $300 million increase, because according to this paragraph, it costs the United States government $7 billion over a 7-year period to preserve 16 million acres, or to preserve 16 million acres over a 7-year period. And this was between 2007 and 2014, when farm real estate was actually less expensive than it is today. So between 2007 and 2014, it cost the United States government about $1 billion a year to preserve only 16 million acres. Now they want to increase it to 25 million acres. I mean, it's already at 21 million acres, but they want to increase it to 25 million acres. So we can infer that's going to cost roughly $2 billion a year to do that. So the American taxpayers are going to be paying roughly $2 billion a year for farmers not to grow food. Now, what has this done, this farmers not growing food? By the way, this program, it came into effect in 1985. So this is the farm real estate value. This is a chart that you can find on the USDA.gov website. So this is an official chart here. So let's look at the farm real estate value. So something happened in the 70s that drove up farm real estate value until about 1982. Actually, I think it's 1983, according to the other information that I looked up. Till 1983, when there was clearly some sort of massive decline. So something was acting on the market here that caused it to quickly go up, nearly doubling. If you look, it goes from $1,000 per acre to almost $2,000 an acre. Something caused farmland to nearly double, and then caused it to almost half. And then, of course, something happened that caused it to continue to go up. Now, in 1985 is when they started this program. So it's very possible that it took a couple of years for this program to really go into effect. And since it's gone into effect, since it's really got off the ground, farm real estate value has been increasing to historic highs. Now, this is all of these moves here are all because of government manipulation and government interference with the market. Let me show you that. So there was a farm bust of the 1980s. What caused this farm bust of the 1980s? Well, in order to understand what caused the bust, we have to understand what caused the rise. So what happened is basically the Secretary of Agriculture, Earl Butz, in the 70s, I don't know exactly what administration he was serving under, told farmers to get big or get out. And then the government made it so that farmers can more easily get loans. So they opened up loans to farmers. Now, this increased production. It actually created record harvests between 1974 and 1979. However, much of that increase in production was financed by borrowed money. In 1962, total farm debt was $60 billion. By 1983, farm debt had skyrocketed to $216 billion. So that's exactly what happened. These farmers took on debt at the direction of the government and with the help of the government, and then that debt became unsustainable, and it caused farms to go under. It caused these farms to go bust. It created a farm bust, where these farms went out of business, and that caused a bunch of farm real estate to hit the market. It super saturated the market. There was more supply than demand, and this drove the price of farm real estate down. Until 1985, the government, claiming that they're fighting climate change, then began to rent property from farmers. Now, when you look into this program promises to pay farmers whatever their top harvest was. So to me, I have a conspiracy that all of this was intentional. Because check this out. 1970s, they're telling farmers to grow a bunch of food. Who cares about the environment? Grow as much food as you can. Grow that food. Take on that debt. And then all of a sudden, just within a 15-year period, actually a 10-year period of time, or about 12-year period of time, they're all like, oh no, stop growing food. The thing is, people, these government bodies, they have think tanks that think about how the next couple of years are going to go, or the next couple of decades. They say, hey, look, over the next 2 decades, we want to take society in this direction. And in order to take society in that direction, we have to do A, B, and C things. And then they go about and they agree upon that, and then they go about doing it. So this is exactly what I think happened here. I think that this was all intentional, so that in 1985, when they start this program, they can be paying farmers whatever their record high yields were to rent their farm or to rent their lands. Now, of course, this has caused an increase. This has created an artificial demand on the market now. The government renting out these lands, these 21 million acres, and it pretty much guarantees these landowners. So, of course, that's the economic side of this. But now let's look at the food supply side of this, because this doesn't really cover the food supply, doesn't necessarily cover the food shortages. With this, you can have expensive food, but not food shortages. But now let's look at the supply side. So the government and all of these propagandists want you to think that 21 million acres is nothing because the United States has over 900 million acres of farmland. So instead of comparing it to the total land farmed in the United States, let's compare that 21 million acres to another country. Let's compare it to Great Britain. How many acres of farmland in Great Britain? Great Britain's total agricultural area used is 23 million acres, about 70% of the land area of England. In other words, the United States pays almost $2 billion a year to put close to 70% of England's total land out of production, or what amounts to about 90% of England's total farmland. However much agriculture England is producing on their 23 million acres, the United States takes that and throws it into the trash, and then looks the world in the face and says we're doing it to fight climate change. I'm telling you, this climate change narrative is a very dangerous narrative. Now let's look at Ukraine, because Biden said that Ukraine is like some breadbasket, and it is. Ukraine has very good soil. It has like 25% of the world's total, what is it called? I think it's called black soil. It's like super rich soil. How much land does Ukraine use? So Ukraine has about 42 million hectares of agricultural land, but they only use, where is it? They only harvest about 32 million or whatever. So let's look at these numbers. So 41.5 million hectares is 102 million acres. This is the other number. I forgot where I got it. The actual amount of their land that they actually use is 35.5 million hectares, which is 87 million acres. But let's go with the 100 million acre number. That means that we intentionally pay farmers not to use a quarter of the farmland that Ukraine has. And we pay a lot of money. We pay over $1 billion, closer to $2 billion a year, to not use that amount of farmland. Now let's look at Russia. Now Russia, I just put a number of acres of wheat in Russia. So during the last 5 years, the wheat acreage in Russia strongly increased by 5% annually. In 2017, there were 79 million acres on which were produced 72 million tons of wheat. So Russia has about 79 million acres of wheat. So we have put out a commission about a third of that in the United States. So this is the truth. Much of the blame for food shortages and high food prices falls on the shoulders of the United States government. And this is, of course, intentional. They want to do this because this is how they really control the population. About 9 million people a year die of hunger and hunger-related diseases. Keep in mind, those 9 million people dying, just keep in mind those 21 million acres of wasted land. Got 9 million people and 21 million acres wasted. You think those 21 million acres couldn't have benefited these 9 million people that starve to death every year? And I know that it's complicated. I know that there are a whole bunch of economic factors in play. I know that if you just give these people food, then you can undermine the local farmers in those areas. I understand all of that. I know it's a lot more complicated than simply growing the food and giving it to people. However, when you put 21 million acres out of commission in one country alone, you're definitely raising the cost of food globally. And the other thing that I thought about were these articles about COVID lockdown-related hunger. These articles titled, "COVID Lockdowns May Increase Hunger-Related Deaths." And COVID-related hunger could kill more people than the virus. COVID-19 linked hunger could cause more deaths than the virus. You have article after article after article reporting on this as early as July 9th of 2020. Time magazine in July of 2020 was pointing this fact out, that these lockdowns were going to cause a massive global supply problem and create severe famines. And another thing that this made me think about is the NATO bombing of the Great Man-Made River System. So when NATO was bombing Libya in 2011, they intentionally bombed this river system, this man-made river system in Libya that was used to provide fresh water for not only the inhabitants of Libya, but even surrounding nations partially depended on this. Okay, this was a very, very vital water source for people in this area, and NATO intentionally bombed this. And this whole article, which is from humanrightsinvestigation.org, goes into all of the fake stories used to justify this bombing and prove that it was a completely unjustified bombing. This bombing makes no sense. It only makes sense if you are intentionally trying to starve people to death or intentionally try to have them die of thirst. And that's exactly what happened. Right now, to this day, if you type into Google, Libya suffers water crisis. You have articles as recently as last year. Over 4 million people, including 1.5 million children, are about to face imminent water shortages in Libya. Why? Well, because they destroyed the Great Man-Made River System. And this is intentional. This is a real crime against humanity right here. And this is what the powers that be do. They go around, they create chaos, and they make it so that we cannot depend on the natural world. They have intentionally destroyed the natural world so that we have to depend on their artificial beast system.